everybody, we're going to be installing a brake kit number 140-8695, which is an 11-inch 4-piston DynaLite brake system that fits most 15-inch wheels on this 1988 Civic CRX Si. We'll be installing our 2-piece hat rotors today, along with our 4-piston DynaLite calipers, billet, brackets, BP10 brake pads, necessary hardware, and steel braided line kit. Let's get started. Okay, now we've got everything disassembled. The first thing that we need to do on this particular kit is notch back both of the stock spindle ears 190 thousandths. You're gonna find that information right inside of your data sheet. So let's get started. The next thing that we're going to be doing is cleaning all of our mating surfaces. The reason for that is we need to make sure that there's no debris on the hub, on its face, or on its center register so that the new 2-piece hat rotor will fit nice and flush up against the face of the hub. We also need to clean off, especially where we just got done grinding on our spindle, to make sure that where our bracket is going to mount directly to the spindle, it's a nice clean surface. And now we're ready to install our brake kit. Okay, so we've got our caliper mounting bracket. If you look at your installation sheet, you'll see that it bolts to this face of the spindle. There's gonna be no spacers in between the spindle and the bracket. But one thing to keep in mind with this particular kit, the 3/8 bolts that are gonna hold this bracket on, we need to double up on our install washers. They need to go double on this backside to keep the head of the bolt that way. So we're gonna double those up. And then you'll also see that we have reducers that are gonna go into the spindle that reduce down to the 3/8 24 bolt diameter. Once those are installed, we're gonna bring our bracket so that the clinch nut, these gold parts, are facing out towards the wheel side, and install our bolts. We're gonna tighten those up by hand. Double check that the bracket is flat up against the face of the mounting tabs of the spindle. And once we know that, we're going to take one bolt out at a time. Lock tight our threads. Tighten by hand. Take our lower bolt out. Lock tight by hand. And then we're gonna get our torque wrench set up to the correct bolt torque spec. So we're gonna set our 3/8 torque wrench to 40 foot-pounds and tighten these two bolts. Okay, we're gonna get into assembling our 2-piece hat rotors. I don't wanna mess up the front face of this hat. And as you can see, I'll set the logo facing up and make sure that I'm bolting the rotor to this face of the hat. Then I'll take our 11-inch rotor, and you can see that this is the front face of the rotor and this is the back face. We want the front face to bolt to the back side of the hat assembly. Once I have those lined up, I'll take our Loctite and start installing our 6 bolts. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is torque down our 6 bolts on this hat rotor, and we're gonna go in a cross pattern. So we're gonna start here, then go here, then we're gonna come here and go here, then we're gonna go here and finish there. Be careful when you're doing this that your wrench stays square to the bolt. So the next step is we're gonna go ahead and take this hat rotor assembly and bolt it up to our hub. We're gonna take the hat and rotor, and you can see that it's gonna be the back side of the hat is bolted to the front face of this rotor assembly. This particular car comes with 2 set screws, which we're going to reuse. These only need to be hand tight. They don't need to be very tight because once your wheel is installed, it will capture this screw. Okay, so now we're ready to install the caliper. One of the main things that we need to make sure is that when we install this caliper, it's centered over the rotor from left to right. On the instructions, it shows to use one shim in between the caliper and the bracket. I'm gonna go ahead and take the caliper and pull the cotter pin out. And what I like to do is install the bolt into the caliper, then install one of the shims that are provided in the bolt kit. Then bring the caliper over and onto the bracket, and I'll tighten this down by hand. I'll take the same size bolt, the 3/8 bolt, and install it onto the bottom. Take both of those and tighten them down by hand. Make sure that our rotor is still moving freely and nothing is binding. After that, what I'm gonna do is look at our spacing from the center of the caliper to the center of the rotor. We want the same amount of gap here as we have there. At this point, we'll install the brake pads. Make sure that the friction surface is facing the face of the rotor. Make sure that everything still moves freely. If our centering of the caliper is good, leave it alone. If it's not, install or take out one of the shims that goes between the caliper and the bracket. Once we know that we have the caliper centered over the rotor with the brake pads installed, what we're gonna do is take out one of the caliper mounting bolts at a time with our shim or shims installed, and Loctite our bolts and torque these bolts to 40 foot-pounds. After we've torqued our caliper mounting bolts, we're going to install our cotter pin and give it a simple bend on 1/2. We've now got the caliper installed. So now we're ready to install our steel braided line kit. The first thing that we're going to do is make sure that we're using the inlet of the caliper, which is located on the inside body, and there will be a decal that explains that it's the fluid inlet and it's 1/8 inch 27 NPT. We'll take our Teflon tape and put it onto the pipe threads of our 90-degree fitting and install the fitting. So on this particular brake kit, we're going to use our bracket and grommet to fix our steel braided line kit to the spindle upright. First step is take your grommet and apply a little bit of oil to it. Take the grommet and install it over the steel braided line and make sure that it's loose. The next step is install just a little bit more oil in between the two sides of the grommet so that we can install our bracket. So now that we have the steel braided line secured to the upright on the spindle, we're going to take our 90-degree end, which is going to go to the chassis fitting, and lightly screw the chassis fitting onto the 90-degree side of our steel braided line. Straighten the wheel back out, and on this particular car, our line is routed like that. At this point, we'll go ahead and make our connection up on the chassis side. Once we have our lines tightened, install your clip. Then turn the wheel left to right at full lock to make sure that it is clear of any suspension. Okay, we've got this brake kit installed on our Honda Civic. We're gonna go ahead and bleed the brakes. We wanna make sure that we're bleeding the outside, then inside of the bleeders facing up on this side of the car. After that, you'll install your wheels and tires, make sure that you torque them to the provided torque specs of the manufacturer, and go out and follow the instruction sheet on how to bed the brakes in properly. If you have further questions, feel free to give us a call at 805-388-1188 or go to our website at wilwood.com.